So this video is on key points for chapter 4 for those of you that are studying trilogy, and this was delivered in school on the week beginning the 5th of July. So we're going to start off by looking at some of the key points from chapter 4. Chapter 4 is basically called bioenergetics, and it involves two main topics, and that is photosynthesis and respiration. So we're going to have a look at what the photosynthetic reaction is, what the rate of photosynthesis is and how it can be affected, how glucose from photosynthesis is used, and then for respiration we're going to have a look at the differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration, responses to exercise and metabolism. And as you're watching this video you will need the accompanying worksheet to fill in, or if you can't print out the worksheet you need to have a look at it and make some notes as we go through. So, starting with photosynthesis. The first thing that we need to know about photosynthesis is we need to know that essentially plants take energy from the sun in the form of light and use it to make food, but specifically glucose. You won't get marks if you write food in your exam. You need to remember that it makes the sugar glucose. And the word photosynthesis comes from photo meaning light and synthesis meaning to make. So the plant makes glucose from carbon dioxide and water using energy that is transferred from the environment, and that happens in the chloroplasts. Now, it can be any sort of light. It doesn't have to be sunlight. It can be artificial light. But in an exam, you can't just write that it's sun. All right, you have to put the light. It's the light bit that's important. So plants take in water from the roots, they take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then they, in the leaves and the chloroplasts, they produce the glucose and they produce oxygen, and the oxygen they release back out into the atmosphere. And this is the key equation that you need to know. So it's water plus carbon dioxide goes to glucose plus oxygen, and it's really important that we remember this equation and this way round. So you do need to know the chemical formulae for each of these components of this equation, and they should be very familiar to you, the majority of them. So water is H2O, carbon dioxide CO2, glucose, this is probably the most unfamiliar one to you, and glucose is C6H12O6, and oxygen, which is O2. Please remember that these need to be capital letters and these need to be subscript numbers. Right? The most common mistake people make is they make these numbers large, and that's not correct. The other thing that we need to think about is in terms of energy transfer. So photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction. It takes in energy from the surroundings, and that energy comes in from the light. So it takes in that energy and uses that to convert water and carbon dioxide into glucose and oxygen. So there are what we refer to as limiting factors, and limiting factors are things that slow down the rate of photosynthesis and stop it from happening as quickly as it can. And there are three main limiting factors, plus another one which can have an effect. So they are the temperature, and we'll talk about each one of these individually in a minute. The light intensity, and again it's key that we remember that we have to write in our exams light intensity. Carbon dioxide concentration, and again it's key that we remember to write down concentration. And then the amount of chlorophyll can limit the rate of photosynthesis if the leaf is variegated, and a variegated leaf looks like this. So it has some white parts where there is no chlorophyll, and then it has some green parts where there is chlorophyll. So we need to remember these three limiting factors: temperature, light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and the amount of chlorophyll. So this is a graph of what light intensity against rate of photosynthesis looks like. So you can see that as our light intensity increases, so does our rate of photosynthesis, and then it starts to level off. That, the posh word for that, if you want to remember that, is plateaus. So it plateaus off or levels off. So what this shows us is it doesn't matter how much more light we give the plant, the rate doesn't get any higher. It always stays here, at this point here. Okay. So then we've got the same for carbon dioxide concentration. When we initially increase the carbon dioxide concentration, we increase the rate of photosynthesis. But again, it plateaus off, it levels off, doesn't get any higher. Okay, and then lastly we've got the temperature, a completely different graph. It goes up and it goes down. Okay, so you need to stop the video here and have a go at filling in some of these missing words if you can, and then we will carry on and we will fill them in together. So what does this first graph show us here? Well, the first graph shows us that as the light intensity increases, so does the rate of photosynthesis, but then the line levels out. When the line levels out, it says increasing the intensity of light has no difference. So no matter what the light intensity is here or what the light intensity is here, the rate of photosynthesis is still the same. So this means that something else is stopping photosynthesis from having or being able to work as fast as it can. And that something else could either be the carbon dioxide concentration or the temperature. Okay, so that means that along here it's not light that's limiting it anymore. It might be that it's temperature that's slowing it down, or it might be the carbon dioxide concentration. This graph, we've got carbon dioxide concentration. As it's increasing initially, so does the rate of photosynthesis. And then it starts to level off. It doesn't matter what we do to the carbon dioxide concentration, okay, it stays the same rate of photosynthesis. So what could be limiting it here? Well, it could be the light intensity, or it could be the temperature. So these two graphs are very similar. On the slope, what's limiting it is whatever's on the x-axis here, light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration. And then it's the other things that are limiting it when it plateaus off. So if you've got light intensity here, it's carbon dioxide or temperature. If you've got carbon dioxide here, it's light intensity or temperature. Now this graph is slightly different because it goes up and then it goes down. So down here, we've got as the temperature increases initially, so does the rate of photosynthesis. The molecules are moving quicker because they've got more energy, they collide more frequently, the reaction speeds up. Then we have what we call the optimum temperature. And at the optimum temperature, the rate of photosynthesis drops very rapidly. It goes down practically to zero. And this relates to some of the work that you did earlier in Year 10 relating to enzymes. We've denatured the enzymes and photosynthesis cannot take place. Now all of these limiting factors are very important, particularly if you're trying to grow plants in a greenhouse. If you get the temperature right, the carbon dioxide right, the light intensity right, your plants will grow very quickly. So we've now got an exam question. So again, you need to pause the video and try and complete the exam question, and then we will go through the answers. So, question 1, part A, very simple gap fill. It's just asking you to complete. So in your head, think to yourself, right, what do plants take in? They take in carbon dioxide and water. And what do they give out? Glucose and oxygen. What type of energy does a plant use in photosynthesis? And as I said before, remember the answer really must be light. It could be sunlight, it could be artificial light. If you wrote sunlight, you would get a mark. But if you just wrote sun, you wouldn't. Which part of the plant cell absorbs the energy needed for photosynthesis? So it's asking you which part of the cell basically photosynthesis takes place, and the answer is chloroplast. If you've written chlorophyll, you can also have a mark. So the graph shows the effect of the concentration of carbon dioxide on the rate of photosynthesis in tomato plants at 20 degrees. So Along the bottom here, we've got percentage of concentration of carbon dioxide in the air, rate of photosynthesis, and arbitrary units. An arbitrary unit is just a unit that we use sometimes if we don't have an actual unit, and it just means they're comparable. So 10 arbitrary units is twice as much as 5 arbitrary units. So what is the maximum rate of photosynthesis of the tomato plants shown in the graph? So we're looking for rate, we're looking for maximum rate, and if we read across, you'll find the answer comes out to be 20. At point X, carbon dioxide is not a limiting factor because it doesn't matter how much we give it, it's not getting any higher. So what factor could limit the rate of photosynthesis? Well, we've been looking at this, and you could have written light intensity, or you could have written temperature. A farmer plans to grow tomatoes in a large greenhouse. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 0.04. The farmer adds carbon dioxide to the greenhouse, so its concentration is 0.08. Why does the farmer use 0.08 carbon dioxide? We've got a tick box question where we have to tick one box. Is it to increase the rate of growth of the plants? To increase the rate of respiration of the tomato plants? To increase water uptake? Well, fairly obviously, the answer is to increase the rate of growth. Why does the farmer not use a concentration of carbon dioxide higher than 0.8? Tick two boxes. So if you go back to the graph, what they're saying, so he's up the increase to here, to this point here. Why doesn't he use a higher one? Well, it's going to cost more money, and it actually wouldn't make any difference at all to the rate of photosynthesis. So we're looking for those 2 marks there. So that is an overview of photosynthesis. Now we're going to have a look at what happens when what the plant does with the glucose that it produces. So basically, it takes the glucose and it can do many things with it. It can be used for respiration. Remember, respiration releases energy. Now, plants photosynthesize in the light, but they respire all of the time, like all living things. But the rate of photosynthesis in the light is greater than the rate of respiration because the plant needs excess glucose. So it needs glucose that it's not using for respiration so that it can put it together into starch molecules and store it, so that it can add things together and make fats and oils and store them in seeds. If it adds nitrates, so nitrogen and oxygen, nitrates from the soil, it can make amino acids, and then that can make proteins. Or it can put the cellulose together to make, put the glucose together to make cellulose, which it uses to make cell walls. So we're going to again have a look at our worksheet and just remind ourselves of what's going on. So these are the uses of glucose. Glucose is used to make lipids. So again, you want to stop the video and see if you can join up the lines, but we'll go through them. Lipids are used for storage in seeds. Many glucose molecules join together to make starch. Starch is insoluble, so used for storage. Cellulose is used to make cell walls. And glucose plus nitrates is used to make proteins. So now we're going to have a look at the second part of chapter 4, and that's a bit about respiration. Now, the first thing that we need to know about respiration is that there are 2 types, aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic, this is the equation that we need to know for aerobic respiration. Glucose plus oxygen gives water plus carbon dioxide. It is exactly the opposite of the photosynthesis equation. But in an exam, just think to yourself, what am I doing? I'm breathing in oxygen, I'm breathing out carbon dioxide, I am respiring. All right, plants are taking in carbon dioxide and giving out oxygen. So aerobic respiration, this is really important. It happens in all cells, in all living things, all of the time, and particularly in plants and animal cells or eukaryotic cells. It happens in the mitochondria. Then we have anaerobic respiration. Now, there are 2 types of anaerobic respiration. This one at the top here, this is alcoholic fermentation, and this happens in some plants and yeast. It takes the glucose, and anaerobic means without oxygen, and it produces ethanol and carbon dioxide. This is how we can brew beer or make wine. We add yeast to something, it takes the glucose and it converts it into ethanol, which is an alcohol, and carbon dioxide. Or we can use the carbon dioxide to help make bread rise. In us, if we don't have any oxygen, so we're doing a long distance race or a sprint, then the glucose is converted into lactic acid, and that happens in the muscles of animals during intense exercise. Lactic acid is poisonous, so we have to wait until we've finished exercising in order to break down that lactic acid further. So, when we are exercising and there's not a lot of oxygen getting in, there are some things that we do. Our heart rate increases. This carries more blood around the body to the muscles, so the muscles can get oxygen and glucose, and they can remove the carbon dioxide. Our breathing rate increases. We breathe in and out more frequently to get more oxygen in and more carbon dioxide out. Our breathing volume or our depth increases. So we fill up our lungs with more oxygen or more air to get more oxygen out of it, and then we can get rid of more carbon dioxide. Please, in an exam, do not write we breathe more. That doesn't mean anything. So basically, the whole point of all of these is we increase the delivery of glucose and oxygen to the cells, and we remove carbon dioxide from the cells. And then respiration happens as efficiently as possible, and you can carry on exercising. So let's have a look at this exam question. So again, pause the video, have a look at the exam question and see what it is you think you need to do. So respiration is a process which takes place in living cells. What is the purpose of respiration? It is to release energy. That's the key. Okay, we never ever write produce energy. Energy cannot be produced, but it can be released. We've got a chemical equation here to balance. It's a very simple equation to balance. We just pop 6's in front of all of these. What is the name of the substance in the equation with the formula C6H12O6? Glucose. Right, oxygen is absorbed through the alveoli in the lungs. How the alveoli adapt for their function. And this was something we did back in chapter 2. So alveoli have got a large surface area, they're thin, they're moist, have got a good blood supply. Name the gas which is excreted through the alveoli. So which gas do we get rid of? Carbon dioxide. And what is the name of the process of respiration when oxygen is not available? It's anaerobic respiration. So that's a brief overview of chapter 4. Thank you.